Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1992 film, The Player. Now, before I go any further, I want to give a special shout out to Brion for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you'd like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Player is one of those films that I've seen a handful of times. It's a movie that I do appreciate. There are aspects of it that I honestly really like. And at the end of the day, I do like the movie, but I don't love it. I think it's lacking in some areas for me to genuinely say that I'm a big fan. But it's a movie that I'm definitely enamored with in some capacity, in particular with certain performances and certain parts of the film's script, as well as the direction. And I might as well start with that. I think the direction by Robert Altman is amazing. I think he did a phenomenal job with this. He really brought a epic size and scope to such a low budget, relatively independent production. Like, this was not a big major tentpole production by any means. But Altman behind the camera made it feel and look a lot bigger than it is. I mean, the opening sequence, which is just one long tracking shot throughout the studio, is just tremendous and just a great example of fine filmmaking, as well as a showcase of some of Altman's finest work. And the rest of the film has some really solid camera work as well. Good use of angles, good use of POVs, good use of style and flair and just uniqueness when it comes to just utilizing the lighting in a scene or the shadow or a certain location or creating a certain mood or a feel. It has a very consistent tone visually. There's not a lot of jarring bits of direction where things are kind of jumping back and forth when it comes to the tone of the film visually. So yeah, I would say the most consistently great thing about this movie is the direction by Robert Altman. Um, Definitely some just dynamic and strong work here by Robert, and I would say probably maybe even his best work. And that's saying a lot considering he's a very accomplished, very established filmmaker with films like Nashville and so on. The screenplay is by Michael Tolkien, based on the novel that he wrote of the same name called The Player. And this script is at times brilliant. It's witty. It's just a really compelling, engaging script that really sucks you in. I think it's got a great hook with the whole mysterious postcards that are threatening in nature that are sent to this studio head, Griffin Mill, and the mystery behind who's sending them. And then it spirals into an actual murder investigation. I think there's a good hook here, but I don't think the execution is necessarily as strong as it could have been. But when it comes to executing the film's satire and its scathing takes on Hollywood and the Hollywood machine and studio politics, this script is almost second to none, even today. Like the way that it just skewers just silly over the top pitches like The Graduate 2 or Goldie Goes to Africa, or even the stuff with habeas corpus. Like the stuff with habeas corpus is just, oh, it's so good. And it honestly still resonates just as strongly today when it comes to the satire. Because you have this writer who is just really passionate about this story that he wrote, this film, this writer, Tom Oakley. And he's not only passionate about the script, but he's passionate about it being made a certain way. He's even talking to Griffin and he's saying, like, this has got to be an independent production, a low budget movie, no big names, no big stars. and no Julia Roberts, no Bruce Willis, and it's got to have the ending has to be exactly how it is on the page because that would sacrifice the integrity of the entire script and it would miss the entire point that I'm trying to make. And it's got to be cold, it's got to be hard, it's got to be real. And then by the end of the movie, the film gets made, habeas corpus, and it stars Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis. And the ending is changed to a more traditional, happy Hollywood ending that is more appealing to wider audiences. And it cuts to the same writer, and he's ecstatic. He's happy with it. And he's happy with it because he got paid. Because that's the name of the game. It's not about integrity of your narrative or your script or your story. It's about money. It's about fame. It's about power. And I really like that part of the script. I also like the fact that the ending of the movie, it not only has a bit of meta commentary about the film itself, because there's this whole idea from this mysterious postcard writer, which is going to be made into a movie about an executive who gets embroiled in a murder investigation, and it's called The Player. So that's a nice bit of meta commentary there. But also, I love how the ending of the movie just flips the idea of a traditional happy ending on its head. Because yeah, it's got everything that you look for out of a happily ever after kind of ending, where the guy gets the girl and they live happily ever after in a nice house with a picket fence and they're gonna have a family. But Griffin got away with murder. So I love that. I love that aspect of the script. And I do think it has some great moments of wit, great moments of humor. Uh, but the script is lacking in some other areas. For one, the investigation aspect of the script is not nearly as strong as it could be because it seems like an afterthought way too often when it comes to the way the narrative flows. So you have a lot of scenes in the movie that just kind of gloss over the investigation and focus on other aspects of the script, which if that's the case, why even have the investigation to begin with? Or maybe have it set up in a different way. Because I think the best parts of the script are dealing with the absurdity and the hypocrisy of Hollywood and studio politics and backstabbing and so on and so forth. And I think if you had fleshed out the stuff with Larry Levy a little bit more, made him more of a consistent antagonist to Griffin, and then you really just make the film about the two of them just going at one another, trying to one up each other, trying to take each other down, and then maybe that leads to a murder investigation where one of them dies. That would be interesting. A lot more interesting to me than what they did here because there's a lot of stuff with the investigation where the way that it's handled, it not only feels like an afterthought, but it also feels like it's just a total joke. So it makes it even harder to take seriously. Because a lot of the stuff with the investigation angle is handled very tongue in cheek. So it makes it feel like, is this just a satire of investigations, a satire parody? I mean, not a satire parody, but I mean a parody of police investigations when it comes to dealing with powerful people. I don't know. I really don't know what the case is, but the way that it's presented it just doesn't really have the same impact as I think it could. And the love story to me doesn't work at all. First off, it just feels very skeevy having this guy who murdered Kahane falling for Kahane's girlfriend. It's very skeevy, and on top of that, it's not even like it's a natural progression when it comes to the love story. Like he stalks her earlier, so that makes it even skeevier, and then they just start to fall in love, and it just feels like this is just there because they needed a love story. And I didn't feel the love story worked anyway. And I know why it's there so you can set up the ending of the movie. But I think there could have been a better way to handle it. Also, just the way that's written, I mean, you have this whole stuff with Bonnie and Griffin, and it's established that Griffin, and it seems like he has feelings for her, but then he drops her like a bad habit and then goes with this other girl. And I know what that's trying to show. It's trying to establish how cutthroat of a person Griffin is and how it matches the industry. But it feels like something that's pretty tired and pretty cliched when it comes to a character narrative or characterization in general. And it doesn't help that the love story just isn't that compelling. So the film just really loses a lot of steam, a lot of um, genuine intrigue to me when it shifts from the murder investigation or just the satire of Hollywood to the love story. But I still like this script. I think it's uneven at times, and the uneven nature of the script is honestly the biggest reason why I don't love the movie. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a good script with a good hook, and a lot of genuinely great bits of satire. One other thing I want to mention about the script is I don't really feel it really added a ton of depth to Griffin's character, which also made the love story less compelling and just kind of made the film a little bit less compelling overall as it went on, because there's really not a lot of extra layers to Griffin as a character. There's not really a lot of sympathy that you feel for him. He's very one note, very one sided, this cutthroat studio executive who's willing to get away with murder to get what he wants. And it just, it does. It feels like a very one note portrayal. But I think that's kind of what they were going for. So in that regard, I think it's fine, but I think it could have been better if you just added a little bit more to this character, make him a little bit more sympathetic. Now, the film features, in my opinion, a pretty top-notch, pretty terrific cast, headlined by Tim Robbins, who plays Griffin Mill, and this is definitely one of Tim Robbins' best performances of his career. The way that he handles different subtle nuances of this character is just phenomenal. Like, there are scenes in this film where he's not even saying a single line of dialogue. He's just sitting in a chair, and he's able to evoke a consistent and strong emotion from just his body language. It's a really impressive performance, and he makes the most out of a pretty one-note character. In all honesty, the character is very one-note, but Tim Robbins makes the character come to life in a way that is charismatic and honestly kind of fun to watch at times because of just how much Tim brings to the role. Uh, that's why it's kind of disappointing you don't see more of him doing the workplace politics or him playing the game more and being the player. And instead he's doing the stuff with the love story and trying to stay away from the authorities and all of that. Honestly, would have liked to have seen more of the schmoozing and more of the backstabbing and all of that, because I think Tim would have just really excelled having more opportunities to do those kind of things with this character. But what he has, though, he still makes the most out of it and then some. His co-star, though, Greta Scacchi is June. Not so much. I think this is a pretty average performance. I didn't really buy the chemistry between her and Tim when it comes to the love story between the two. I don't really think they really fit that well when it comes to their styles of acting. Um, Also, her performance, like I said, is just very mediocre to me. But then at the same time, her character is very mediocre. So maybe this is one of those things where the script was just such a mediocre script when it comes to providing anything for this character to really work with. So as a result, Greta's just kind of left in the lurch here, and just left with not a significant amount of meat on the bone to work with for her character. Fred Ward, though, I really liked as Walter Stuckle. Not in it a ton, but he's in it enough that it leaves an impression. I just think he played the role of a well-meaning security expert at the studio um, very well. He added a certain amount of personality to the character that made it stand out. His references to classic Hollywood films and so on and so forth. Plus, I just really like Fred Ward, so it's nice to see him in a movie like this. Whoopi Goldberg, she's honestly really good as Susan Avery, but she's not in it a ton. But she did such a good job playing this character that I really did want to see more of this character. I wanted to see more of Whoopi Goldberg playing this detective who doesn't take shit from anybody and is not afraid to be honest. Is this one of those things where the character really wasn't much of a focus when it comes to the film, so the character isn't in it a lot. Peter Gallagher played a great schmuck as Larry Levy. Did such a good job playing a schmuck here that that's another thing I wanted to see more of. I wanted to see the rivalry between him and Griffin, and I wanted to, like I said earlier, I wish that was more of the focus with this film, with this script, instead of the whole noir aspect of it, with the neo noir stuff, with the murder investigation, and so on and so forth. Um, you could have still had that, but I really feel that shouldn't have been like the main focus. It's a good hook to maybe get you engaged and interested in the movie, but as the film goes on, that becomes less and less of a hook anyway. So I think you could have easily just transitioned away from that to the rivalry between these two studio executives. Um, you also have Brion James, who plays Joel Levison, who is like the head of the studio, and it was really refreshing to see Brion James play this kind of role, a role of power, a role of influence. He's the head of the studio, and he has a certain presence to him, a certain stoicism, a certain sternness or intensity that definitely does lend itself well to this role. Cynthia Stevenson was also fine as Bonnie. Uh, Honestly, she had more chemistry with Tim Robbins. So you could have just swapped the roles. You could have had Bonnie play the girlfriend of Kahane, and then have Greta Scacchi play the girl who she thinks she's an item with Griffin. She thinks she's going to have a certain path in the industry, and then it's all taken away from her. Because, yeah, I do think that, yeah, she's not, let's just say Cynthia Stevenson is not as beautiful, at least in a traditional sense, as Greta Scacchi, but I don't think that's necessarily something that had to be a major factor here in the casting. It's all about chemistry, and I think Cynthia Stevenson and the scenes with her and Tim Robbins, they work together so much better. And I think the film would have worked a little bit better if you had them being the main romance, because then it would be like, okay, I kind of still don't care about this romance, but at least I get to see more on-screen chemistry. The rest of the cast is good too. I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio is David Kahane in a very early kind of standout role, playing this frazzled, alcoholic writer who is fed up with the industry and is also angry and disgruntled at Griffin. Uh, he's a believable red herring where you're like, you could definitely see why Griffin thought that he was the one that was sending the postcards. Dean Stockwell, it's fun to see him in this as Andy, this guy who works. I think he's like the agent for Tom Oakley's character. I mean, Richard E. Grant's character, Tom Oakley. So yeah, he plays Andy, who's the agent for Richard E. Grant, and the two, they're a good pair, and I like them enough that I even would have liked to see more scenes with them because they have some really nice dynamic moments when it comes to the two playing off one another. Richard B. Grant in particular is just a treat to watch, playing this writer who's just infatuated with his writing so much that he can't fathom speaking about his film in a pitch that isn't elaborate and over the top. You also have a bunch of other actors and actresses that played roles in this, but didn't get paid that much and did it honestly as a favor to Robert Altman. And so you got like Burt Reynolds, who even calls Griffin an asshole in one memorable scene, which apparently was totally improvised, which I think is great because a lot of these actors, these famous stars at the time, they weren't given lines of dialogue. The script didn't have lines for them. So Altman just let them improvise, and the results were really effective and honestly pretty funny. Jeff Goldblum talking about, like who's the villain in Ghostbusters? Andy McDowell having a bit of reunion with Richard E. Grant from Hudson Hawk. Jeff Goldblum, like I said, playing himself. Bruce Willis and Julia Roberts playing themselves, starring in Habeas Corpus. Jeremy Piven, Gina Gershon, Lyle Lovett, who plays the detective who's working with Whoopi Goldberg, but he's not playing himself. He's just playing, a character. And so is Gina Gershon, and so is Jeremy Piven. But yeah, all these other actors that make appearances in the film, they really were not given any significant roles to work with. They're just in the movie, and I'm trying to find a list of all of them just to list them off because that's another fun aspect of the movie is just to play this game of like guess who or just check and see which star is going to show up in the next scene. So yeah, Burt Reynolds is one of them. I think Sally Kellerman was there. Cher, and a handful of others. The film also features some good technical elements, some good technical aspects of the production, like the cinematography by Jean Lapine. It's a really nice looking film, especially when it comes to the more noir influenced sequences, like the scene in the alley, and some of the other shots throughout the film that are really trying to evoke a certain atmosphere. The film also features some good editing by Geraldine Perioni, especially when it comes to just matching the frenzied sort of anxious, frantic nature of Griffin as the investigation goes on, and as he's increasingly more and more the focus of this murder investigation, and he's also targeted by the studio in terms of being replaced by somebody else, and there's all the stuff going on with the love story as well, and does a good job really just showcasing Griffin's just descent into just desperation when it comes to the editing and how everything is just very kinetic in that way. And the film, for the most part, goes at a decent enough pace. At times, though, it is a bit too slow because you're not really as invested in certain parts of the story as you are with others. But yeah, at the end of the day, I would recommend the film if you're really interested in seeing a movie that talks about the intricacies and just various different absurdities of Hollywood and workplace politics and things like that. With a nice little take on a film noir. I think if that is something that's up your alley, it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it already. Um, and it's a film that I wouldn't mind picking up one of these days for the collection, just for Altman's direction, Tim Robbins' performance, and the really just brilliant bits of satire on Hollywood in general. I mean, the whole stuff where they cast Habeas Corpus with Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis and changed the ending is something that still is very relevant today because studios are less and less likely to put money into a film and greenlight it if it's not going to make them money, if it's too out there, it's too out of the box. So they're going to change things around, or they're just not going to make it. And in this case, they change things around so much that the end product is completely unrecognizable from the original script. And that's a common problem in today's industry. And when it comes to the climate, at least at the time of recording this review in the industry, everything is going through an upheaval with the recent strikes and everything. And this film has even more relevance now because of that, because of the way that it shows how writers are treated as throwaways, as people who have their ideas used and abused for the sake of profit in the industry. And it definitely is something that adds an extra layer to this film. But anyway, thanks for watching my thoughts on The Player, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.